The sun was setting over San Francisco, casting a golden hue over the towering skyscrapers. Among them stood Lockwood Financial Group, an empire in the finance world, where multi-billion-dollar deals were made and legacies were built. On the top floor, inside an extravagant conference room, Elliot Lockwood, the CEO, sat at the head of a long mahogany table. At 60 years old, with silver-streaked hair and a gaze as sharp as ever, he was a force of nature, a man who could shift the tides of the financial world with a single decision. His presence alone commanded authority. Across from him, sitting at the opposite end, was Noah Hayes, the 30-year-old CEO of Hayes Tech, a rapidly growing fintech company. Noah wasn't just any rising entrepreneur. He was a prodigy, a man who built his empire from nothing and never accepted failure. His navy blue suit was perfectly tailored, his posture composed, his gaze unwavering. There was no fear in his eyes, only determination. Today, these two men sat across from each other to finalize a merger worth billions, a deal that would shake the financial industry. Neither of them knew that this was more than just a business deal. They were father and son, separated for 30 years by fate. As the meeting concluded, Elliot extended his hand, a practiced, effortless gesture of power. Noah responded, gripping his hand firmly. But the moment their hands met, something strange happened. A feeling of familiarity. For a split second, Elliot's gaze lingered on Noah's face. The sharp jawline, the piercing eyes. Something in his memory stirred, but he couldn't place it. Noah felt it too. He had shaken hands with countless business partners, but this one was different. Neither of them knew that the hands they had just shaken belonged to their own flesh and blood. San Francisco was dazzling at night, the city bathed in shimmering lights. In the heart of it, the Beverly Hills shopping district was alive with luxury. Exclusive boutiques, high-end jewelry stores, and designer brands catered to the elite, their storefronts gleaming with opulence. Elliot Lockwood wasn't a man who indulged in shopping, but tonight he accompanied his wife Vanessa and their daughter Sophia. Dressed in an elegant red silk gown, Vanessa clung to Elliot's arm possessively, while Sophia, effortlessly graceful, admired a sparkling diamond bracelet in a lavish jewelry store. "Dad, does this bracelet suit me?" Sophia asked, her eyes gleaming with excitement. Elliot nodded with a faint smile, though his mind was elsewhere. On the other side of the shopping district, Noah Hayes strolled beside his mother, Evelyn Hayes. Though in her early 50s, Evelyn still carried a quiet elegance. She wore a beige coat, her eyes warm with a mother's gentle wisdom. "Do you want to buy anything, Mom?" Noah asked as they passed a boutique. Evelyn shook her head with a soft smile. "No, I'm just enjoying the walk." Fate had already set the stage for their worlds to collide. As Elliot stood before a display case examining an exquisite timepiece, a familiar voice spoke from behind him. "Good evening, Mr. Lockwood." Elliot frowned slightly and turned. Standing before him was Noah Hayes, the young and brilliant CEO, his new business partner. Elliot gave a composed nod. "Good evening, Noah." They shook hands, a formality between powerful men. But as their hands parted, Elliot's gaze inadvertently fell upon the woman standing behind Noah. Evelyn. Time stood still, the world blurred into silence. The woman he had once loved, the woman he had lost, the woman he believed had vanished forever. Elliot froze. So did Evelyn. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, 30 years of buried memories surfaced in an instant. Elliot's voice dropped to a whisper, as if he couldn't believe his own eyes. "Evelyn, is that you?" Evelyn stood frozen, unable to move. Then came the question that shattered the air. "Is this your son?" Evelyn's breath hitched. She couldn't answer. Why was he asking that? Did he sense something? Noah sensed the tension and frowned. "Mom, do you two know each other?" Evelyn forced herself to nod. I knew him once." Then, before Noah could ask more, she quickly whispered, "Let's go, Noah." Noah, still confused, gave Elliot a polite nod. "See you again, Mr. Lockwood." Elliot remained still, watching them walk away. And for the first time in decades, uncertainty crept into his heart. 3 days later, inside his lavish penthouse office at Lockwood Financial Group, Elliot Lockwood sat in silence before a confidential dossier. This was the private investigation on Evelyn Hayes. Slowly, he opened it. His sharp eyes scanned each line, his fingers flipping through the pages with practiced precision. But then, his hands suddenly froze. Noah Hayes, 30 years old, CEO of Hayes Tech. Evelyn Hayes' only son. Elliot's grip tightened. 30 years ago, Evelyn left him. 7 months later, she gave birth to Noah. It all made sense. A strange, suffocating feeling crept into Elliot's chest. His breath slowed. Noah was his son. His mind reeled, struggling to grasp the reality in front of him. For the first time in his meticulously controlled life, he felt truly unprepared. He turned to the final page. A photograph. Noah and Evelyn standing side by side. They looked strong, accomplished. But there was another man in the picture. David Whitmore, 55 years old, CEO of Whitmore Consulting, a longtime trusted business associate of Evelyn. A different kind of unease settled in Elliot's gut. Who was David to them? Had he been the one standing in Elliot's place all these years? Elliot's fingers tightened around the edge of the dossier, his expression unreadable. 30 years ago, he had let Evelyn walk away. 30 years later, he wasn't going to let this truth slip away so easily. Inside the grand Lockwood estate, Vanessa Lockwood sat frozen on the silk-upholstered sofa, gripping a dossier so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her eyes flicked across the pages, taking in every word, every photograph, as terror settled deep within her. Noah Hayes. Not just a brilliant young entrepreneur, not just a business partner in a billion-dollar deal, he was Elliot's son. Vanessa's blood turned to ice. If Elliot acknowledged Noah, Sophia would lose everything. No, she wouldn't let that happen. Her trembling hands reached for her phone. A deep, gravelly voice answered. "What do you need, Mrs. Lockwood?" Vanessa's voice dropped to a chilling whisper. "Someone needs to disappear." A brief pause, then a low chuckle. "How much?" She shut her eyes, inhaling deeply. "Whatever it takes, just make sure he never comes near my husband again." But she didn't know that her plan had already been exposed. 2 days later, Margaret Lockwood, Elliot's mother, summoned her into the study. A folder lay open on the desk, containing undeniable proof of her hired hitman. Vanessa's face turned pale. "You? You were spying on me?" Margaret's gaze was sharp. "I didn't need to spy. Women like you always leave a trail." Vanessa swallowed hard. "You can't tell Elliot. If Noah is recognized, Sophia..." "Enough!" Margaret's voice was as cold as steel. "You've gone too far, Vanessa. Sophia isn't losing anything. Only you are. And you did this to yourself." The study door swung open. Elliot stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable, but his eyes filled with quiet fury. Vanessa's fingers clenched around the armrest. "You set me up," she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. She turned to Margaret. "You've always hated me. You wanted me gone, didn't you?" Margaret's gaze remained cold. "No, Vanessa. You did this to yourself." Vanessa's breath hitched. She turned to Elliot, desperation creeping into her voice. "Elliot, listen to me. That boy will ruin everything. You think he cares about you?" Elliot exhaled sharply, his voice quiet but firm. "I don't care what you think, Vanessa. You're leaving." And just like that, after 30 years of scheming and control, Vanessa Lockwood was cast out of the very empire she had fought so hard to secure. It was late at night. Inside a sleek, high-rise apartment, Evelyn Hayes sat motionless on the couch, her hands clasped together tightly. Across from her, Noah Hayes stood with a questioning gaze. He had just returned from a long day at work, but the moment he stepped inside, he knew something was wrong. "Mom, what's going on?" Noah asked, his sharp eyes watching her carefully. Evelyn took a deep breath, steadying herself. How could she possibly stay calm when she knew that what she was about to say would change everything? For 30 years, she had held on to this secret, believing that if she buried it deep enough, she could protect her son from unnecessary pain. But after seeing Elliot again, she knew she could no longer keep this hidden. "There's something important I need to tell you," Evelyn said, her voice barely above a whisper. Noah nodded and sat across from her, his expression unreadable. He had never seen his mother this nervous before. Evelyn met his gaze, her heart clenching. She knew this moment would change Noah's life forever. "Noah," she said slowly, each word cutting through her like a blade, "your biological father is Elliot Lockwood." The air turned still. Noah froze, his eyes widening. A cold wave of shock ran down his spine. His breath hitched, his fingers clenching involuntarily. For years he had wondered about his father, but he never imagined this. He let out a dry, disbelieving laugh, a bitter, hollow sound. "You're joking." Evelyn shook her head, her eyes glistening. "I wish I were, my son." Noah shot to his feet, stepping back as if he needed distance from the truth that had just sliced through him. "No, that's impossible. He was never there. He never came looking for me in 30 years. Evelyn's voice broke. "He didn't know you existed." Noah let out a bitter laugh. "And now he does? What does he want, redemption?" "It's too late, Mom. 30 years too late." Evelyn's heart ached. "I'm not asking you to accept him, but you deserve to know the truth." Noah clenched his fists, his expression unreadable. "I don't need a father like Elliot Lockwood." Without another word, he turned and walked to his room, leaving Evelyn sitting alone in the dimly lit apartment, silent tears trailing down her face. A quiet cafe nestled in a secluded corner of San Francisco. Elliot Lockwood stepped inside, his sharp gaze sweeping across the room before landing on the man sitting near the window. "David Whitmore." Elliot approached, pulling out a chair and sitting across from him. Two men, once strangers, now facing each other as silent adversaries. "Thank you for meeting me," Elliot said, his voice calm but firm, eyes never leaving David. David took a sip of his coffee, his demeanor unreadable. "I knew you'd come eventually." Silence stretched between them before Elliot finally spoke. "You've taken care of Evelyn and Noah all these years?" David set his cup down, his gaze steady. "I didn't do it for you, Elliot." Elliot gave a small nod. "I understand." David exhaled, his voice quieter. 30 years ago, Evelyn wanted to go back to you." Elliot stiffened, a sharp pang striking his chest. She wanted to come back?" David nodded. "But when she found out you had married Vanessa, she let you go." "Completely." Elliot's jaw tightened, his hands clenching involuntarily. David continued, his tone neither accusing nor sympathetic. Just the raw truth. "Do you know what she went through? Raising a child alone, working any job she could to survive, never once asking for help. But she never blamed you. She just kept going." Elliot lowered his gaze, feeling an unfamiliar weight pressing down on him. Guilt. David studied him for a long moment before smirking slightly. "So, tell me, Elliot, why are you here?" Elliot met his eyes, his voice steady. "I want to make things right." David leaned back, letting out a small, knowing chuckle. "Then start with your son." The San Francisco sky was overcast as Noah Hayes stepped into the private dining room of an upscale restaurant. He didn't want to be here, but for his mother and for the questions still left unanswered, he needed to face the man who had unknowingly changed his life. Elliot Lockwood was already waiting. He stood when he saw Noah enter, but Noah merely pulled out a chair and sat down, his expression unreadable. "My mother told me everything," Noah said, his voice steady. "So what do you want?" Elliot studied his son. The son he had lost for 30 years. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind countless times, yet now, faced with Noah's piercing stare, words felt inadequate. "I know I have no right to ask for anything," Elliot said slowly. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to do the right thing." Noah let out a short, humorless chuckle. His hands balled into fists. "The right thing? 30 years too late, and now you suddenly care?" He leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering into something colder. "Where were you when my mother struggled to raise me alone? Where were you when I asked her why I didn't have a father?" Elliot's hands tightened into fists, pain flickering in his eyes. "I didn't know you existed, Noah. If I had—" "You didn't know, but you also never looked," Noah cut him off, his voice sharp. "I don't need a father now." Elliot exhaled heavily, his shoulders sagging. "I understand, but I'm not walking away." Noah pushed his chair back, standing. His gaze was cold. "You should." Without another word, he turned and left, leaving Elliot alone in the weight of his regrets. The quiet cafe, softly lit with the warm glow of amber lights. Evelyn Hayes sat by the window, her fingers gently wrapped around a steaming cup of tea. She had known this meeting was inevitable, but that didn't make it any easier. The cafe door swung open. Elliot Lockwood stepped inside, scanning the room until his eyes landed on her. He hesitated for a second, then walked toward her table. "Thank you for meeting me," Elliot said, his voice rough with unspoken emotions. Evelyn looked up, her gaze calm, though a storm brewed beneath. "What do you want, Elliot?" He took in the woman before him, the woman he had lost for 3 decades. There were no rehearsed words, no justifications, only the raw truth. "I'm sorry." 3 simple words, yet they carried the weight of a lifetime of regret. Evelyn was silent for a long moment before letting out a small, knowing smile. 30 years ago, those words would have been too late. Now, do they even matter? Elliot's hands clenched. "I know I can't change the past, but I want to do the right thing. I want to make amends. With you. With Noah." Evelyn studied him, her expression unreadable. Then, she sighed. "If you truly want to make amends, don't say it to me. Say it to your son." The sky over San Francisco was overcast as Noah Hayes walked into the headquarters of Lockwood Financial Group. He wasn't sure why he was here. After everything, he still couldn't forgive the man who had been absent for 30 years. But something inside him told him he needed to face the truth. Elliot Lockwood was already waiting in the conference room. As Noah entered, Elliot stood, but Noah simply crossed his arms, his gaze unreadable. "Where did you call me here?" Noah asked, his tone void of emotion. Elliot looked at his son, then slowly placed a folder on the table. "I've transferred a portion of Lockwood Financial's shares to you, not to buy your forgiveness, but because you deserve to have control over what was once your family's." Noah glanced at the folder before letting out a dry laugh. "You think money can fix everything?" Elliot shook his head. "No, but I don't want you caught up in the same power struggles I once was. I want you to have a choice." Noah studied him for a long moment. For the first time, he saw something different in Elliot's eyes. Not pride, not authority, but genuine remorse. Without a word, Noah picked up the folder and walked out. He wasn't ready to forgive. But this was a start. A few months later, in the small garden behind Evelyn Hayes' home, a quiet gathering took place. No lavish events, no high-stakes negotiations. Just people who had once been divided by the past, now slowly finding their way back to each other. Noah Hayes sat across from Elliot Lockwood. The cold glares and sharp words were gone. Silence remained, but this time, it wasn't tense. Sophia Lockwood was there as well. She had spent weeks avoiding Noah, unsure of how to process the fact that she suddenly had an older brother. But tonight, she finally approached him. "So, do you actually drink coffee, or is that just a CEO thing?" she asked, attempting a lighthearted joke. Noah looked at her for a moment, then smirked. "It's mostly just a CEO thing." Sophia hesitated, then sat beside him. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted quietly. "I don't know what we're supposed to be." Noah's expression softened. "Neither do I, but we can figure it out." They weren't just strangers anymore. They were 2 people trying to accept their new reality. Evelyn stood beside David Whitmore, the man who had been by her side for 30 years, yet she had never fully acknowledged what he meant to her. Today, she didn't run. When David gently took her hand, she didn't pull away. That evening, Noah and Elliot stood on the balcony, looking out at the garden where their family, however unconventional, laughed and talked. Elliot's voice was steady. "Do you regret knowing the truth?" Noah was silent for a moment before replying. "No, but the past can't be changed. only the future. Elliot gave a small smile. Then let's make it better together. For the first time, Noah didn't walk away.